I've had more than a few requests to compare Harley's new Sportster S to their iconic V-Rod, which was in production from 2001 to 2017. Now, it may seem odd to compare an all-new bike to a model that was discontinued 5 years ago, but I do understand the interest and curiosity. You see, the engine in the new Sportster S is very similar in design to the original V-Rod engine. Harley claims they started from scratch and it's an all-new engine design, but is that really true? After your prompting, I'm now curious to dig a little deeper and make some comparisons. Hello, I'm Paul and this is Bikes I Like. Harley has a history of identifying their unique engine designs with their own code name. It helps recognise the era in which they were produced. This started with the F-head in 1903, then the flathead, knucklehead, panhead, shovelhead, evolution, twin cam, right up to the current generation Milwaukee 8. But slotted in there, right around 2001, came the Revolution engine, Harley's first ever production water-cooled V-twin engine. Revolution. Now, where have I heard that recently? It's interesting that Harley's all-new water-cooled Revolution Max engine carries on that same name. Let's drill down a little further, compare some engine design specifications, and see if the similarities are more than just skin deep. The Revolution engine started life at 996 cc's. It was originally created as a collaboration between Harley-Davidson and Porsche Engineering for the VR1000 superbike. I was big into superbikes at the time and remember watching with great interest the development of the VR1000 and how it might compare against the other bikes in the category, hoping to see it compete in the World Superbike Series. But alas, it only made its appearances in America's AMA Superbike rounds. For the introduction of the V-Rod in 2001, a displacement of 1131 cc's was achieved by stroking the crank and boring the cylinders. In 2005, that 1131 cc's grew to 1247 cc's with a Screaming Eagle version, and in 2008, that 1247cc engine capacity became standard for the entire V-Rod line. Screaming Eagle did produce one other version of the Revolution engine, and that was a 1300cc beast producing over 165 horsepower, which found its home in the non-street legal 8-second quarter-mile bike nicknamed the Destroyer. And yes, the wheelie bars were part of the package. Amazingly, 646 of these bikes were produced and 625 of them were released to the dealer showroom floors. But the achievements of the Destroyer didn't end there. The Destroyer inspired the 4-time world champion NHRA Pro Stock motorcycle, the Harley-Davidson Screaming Eagle Vance Hines V-Rod. The Screaming Eagle Vance & Hines V-Rod ran a 6.815 seconds and went nearly 200 miles on a quarter mile. I now see why people are keen to see the two compared, and why Harley is using the Revolution name again today. An engine of this heritage also helps to explain why the Sportster S might be doing so well in my comparison tests. But let's keep digging. Here's where they match up. Both engines are dual overhead cam in design and both are internally balanced. Both engines are 60-degree water-cooled V-twins. Both engines have a very similar capacity of around 1250 cc's. Both have 4-valve heads and both feature tuned induction stacks located between the V. The V-Rod Revolution engine produces its peak horsepower at 8,500 rpm. The Revolution Max engine in the Sportster S produces its peak horsepower at 7,500 rpm. Where the Revolution Max engine differs, however, is with components like twin spark plugs per cylinder, variable valve timing, as well as a host of internal component upgrades too numerous to mention for the purpose of this video. From what I'm seeing, although the new Revolution Max engine is indeed a clean sheet design, I think it's fair to say the Revolution engine of the V-Rod was certainly its starting point and inspiration. And the redesign differences are purely a result of natural technological advancement over time. Now for what you've really come to see. Let's see how the V-Rod and Sportster S compare in terms of specs, 0 to 60 and quarter-mile times. For this comparison, I'm going to use the 2008 VRSC AW V-Rod, primarily because it was the first to use the more comparable 1247cc engine. And out of curiosity, let's throw in the 2006 VRX SE V-Rod, otherwise known as the Destroyer. First up, let's look at horsepower. The Sportster S produces 121 horsepower at 7,500 RPM. The V-Rod AW produces 123 horsepower at 8,000 RPM. And the Destroyer produces 165 horsepower at an unknown RPM. With its 165 plus horsepower, the Destroyer streaks to the lead with the Sportster S bringing up the rear, but not by much. And it is worth remembering the Sportster S engine has been retuned for more torque, down from the 150 horsepower of the Revolution Max engine featured in the Pan America. Speaking of torque, the Sportster S produces 94 foot-pound at 6,000 RPM, the V-Rod AW produces 86 foot-pound at 7,000 RPM, and the Destroyer produces 97 foot-pound at 7,600 RPM. Again, we see the Destroyer take the lead, but this time the AW V-Rod is trailing behind. Surprisingly, the Sportster S is holding its own and nipping at the Destroyer's heels. Now let's look at the wet weight. That's fully fuelled and ready to ride. The Sportster S weighs in at 502 pounds, the V-Rod AW comes in at 670 pounds, and the Destroyer tips the scales at 535 pounds. A win to the Sportster S in the weight division, with the Destroyer not too far behind. Now that we have those figures, let's do power to weight calculations for both torque and horsepower. First up, the power to weight figure for horsepower. As per usual, I'm including a 200 pound or 90 kilogram rider into the equation. The Sportster S measures 0.172, the V-Rod AW measures 0.141, and the Destroyer measures 0.224. When it comes to power to weight and horsepower, the Destroyer certainly earns its name. And now the power to weight figure for torque. The Sportster S measures 0.134, the V-Rod AW measures 0.099, and the Destroyer measures 0.132. Wow, when it comes to power to weight and torque, a surprising win goes to the Sportster S. Armed with all this info, let's try and predict some 0 to 60 and quarter mile times. The numbers are historically well documented and recorded for the V-Rods, so I will use an average of those figures. Until we get some actual timed runs, the real prediction will be for the Sportster S. Starting with the 0 to 60 times, I'd expect to see the Destroyer hit that mark first with a time of 2.3 seconds. The Sportster S runs second at 3 seconds even, and the V-Rod right on its tail at 3.1 seconds. Crossing the line for the quarter mile sees the Destroyer dominating with a time of 8.9 seconds. The Sportster S next at 11.1, and the V-Rod again right on its heels with a time of 11.3 seconds. It's funny, in its heyday I wasn't really interested in this bike, but after doing this little exercise I've learnt a lot and now have a whole new level of appreciation for Harley's very impressive V-Rod. Although I do remember my oldest son loving it and wanting one a few years ago when he first started riding road bikes. Is the new Revolution Max engine a reworked V-Rod engine? No, I believe not. I do believe it is an all-new engine. Are Harley justified in bestowing their new engine with the Revolution title? 100% they are. I believe the new Revolution Max engine captures the core design philosophy of the original Revolution engine and now takes it to an all-new level of sophistication. Well, I've banged on long enough. If you've made it this far, thanks heaps for watching today, and hopefully I'll see all of you again in the next one. Bye for now.